From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gadet. This is Idaho Matters. It's Friday, which means it's time for our Reporter Roundtable. We will get you updated on the news that made headlines this last week. And today, our panel includes Clark Corbin with the Idaho Capital Sun and Nate Eaton, news director at eastidahonews.com. Happy Friday, both of you.
Happy Friday, Gemma.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So, Nate, I want to start this first segment off talking about Lori Vallow Daybell. She was recently found guilty in a trial in Arizona. I had no idea she now is going to have another trial. So, first off, how many trials is this? And what is this next one about?
This is the fourth trial in this case. We had the one in Idaho for Lori and then another one for Chad. We had one just a few weeks ago in Arizona for Lori that was in connection to her fourth husband's murder, and she was found guilty of conspiracy in that case. This final trial, fourth and final, at least we hope, is for the attempted murder of her former nephew-in-law. His name is Brandon Boudreaux. He was driving home from the gym one day, and somebody shot at his window of his car, nearly killed him. He survived. And police say that Alex Cox, Lori's brother, was the shooter, and that Lori Vallow Daybell conspired with her brother to try and kill Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon at the time was married to Lori's niece. He had significant wealth, and the thought is that they were trying to kill him in order to get that money. So jury selection will begin next Thursday in that case, with opening arguments the beginning of June, and then that trial should wrap up by the middle of June.
So, Nate, where is this new trial taking place?
This is in Maricopa County, Arizona, same county as the last trial. Brandon was living in Chandler, Arizona at the time when he was shot at. And so it'll be the same prosecutor as before and the same defense attorney as before, who happens to be Lori Vallow herself. She is representing herself once again. She did that at the last trial, and it created some interesting moments. She does have advisory counsel, two attorneys who sit with her and assist her, along with a paralegal and a private investigator. But she is determined to represent herself at this trial, regardless of the outcome, Gemma. If she's found guilty or not guilty, after she's sentenced in Arizona, she will be brought back to Idaho, where she will serve her 3 life sentences in the prison in Pocatello.
I'm assuming a different judge down in Maricopa County from the judge that oversaw this last trial.
It's actually the same judge. It will be the same judge.
Okay.
She had filed a request for a new judge. She asked the judge to excuse himself. She said that he showed a lack of impartiality. She made all sorts of accusations that he was not being fair to her, that he kept denying her motions. He denied that motion, though, saying that she hasn't presented any legal proof that he showed any sort of bias or impartiality. So it will be the same judge. This is a judge who he runs a pretty tight ship. He doesn't, he's not much into grandstanding or anything. He very much is, and he can't give her legal counsel as much as she may want it or looks like she needs it. She's representing herself. So I imagine that this trial will run very quickly and very smoothly, all based, of course, on how Lori Vallow Daybell reacts. And if she decides to put on a defense, we have not heard a defense from her in any of her trials. She has not presented a defense. She has simply rested and given the case to the jury. So we'll see if that changes this time around.
Yeah, and we should note, judges can never give legal counsel to any parties, right? So, and sometimes people don't always understand that, in particular, if you're representing yourself. With that said, Nate, it has been, in my estimation, more than 5 years since JJ and Kylie went missing and tragically were found to have been killed. Now, I am imagining that prosecuting Lori Daybell, this has not been cheap. So talk to us about who's picking up these expenses, because I think this goes back to tax dollars, correct? I mean, especially for the folks in these small eastern Idaho counties.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's if you're listening to this and you live in Fremont County or Madison County, even Ada County, they hosted the trial. And ultimately, yeah, the taxpayers are paying for this. It has not been cheap. Lori's first trial alone was $1.8 million. That's the
Oh,
estimate. That includes, because she had public defenders, she had two of them. You have to pay the prosecutors. Of course, you got to pay the court staff. You got to pay for everything down to transportation costs to get her from Fremont County, where these crimes happened, to Ada County, where the trial was held. Before that, we had done a public records request and asked how much the investigation cost in total. 3.6 million. That was up until 2023. So you're already looking at, between her trial and the investigation up to that point, over $5 million. Chad Daybell's trial, we don't have the final numbers on that. That was likely around 2 million. And in Arizona, they're footing the bill for these cases. So far, we checked as of last month, it had cost around 85,000, far less cheaper, because the crimes are, there's one crime and far less investigative
mm-hmm,
work. They are having to pay her. They do pay, the cost per inmate in Arizona is around $137 per day. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we could be looking at 5 million, $6 million, 7 million maybe. Plus, Chad Daybell is on death row, and he will be on death row likely for some time. So those costs are always higher with appeals and whatnot. So yeah,
mm-hmm.
this was not a cheap ordeal by any sense of the imagination, as you mentioned, for these small counties.
So, Clark, an interesting discussion happened earlier this week that you wrote about during one of JFAC's spring meeting stops in Idaho Falls. So, quickly refresh us on what JFAC is.
Yeah, JFAC's kind of become my life these days, Gemma, but JFAC's a really important committee of the Idaho legislature. The acronym stands for the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, but the important thing really to remember is JFAC is the legislature's budget committee. They set every budget for every state department and state agency every year. It's a powerful committee. It's probably one of the most important committees when you consider the only real responsibility of the Idaho legislature under the Constitution is to set a balanced budget. And so it's a committee that I followed closely throughout the
Mm-hmm.
legislative session. And the legislature adjourned, Gemma, as we talked about in early April, they adjourned for the year. But every year, JFAC does what's called these interim tours, where even though the legislature's not in session, they go out into the field in the state of Idaho to take a look at some state programs and some state facilities and really get a sense of how the budget is coming together, how different agencies are spending the money, and what their needs are. And so even though they're not able to vote on budgets and bills at this time, it really, if you think about the work they're doing at the state capitol building, they see a lot of spreadsheets and PowerPoint
Mm-hmm.
presentations. But during the off season, they kind of go out across the state and visit these facilities and programs. And so that's what this was all about. It was 3 days. It kicked off Monday in Idaho Falls and wrapped up Wednesday. And the first day was really a discussion about workforce needs in the state of
Uh-huh.
Idaho. The discussion took place at the College of Eastern Idaho buildings in Idaho Falls, and they had all kinds of industry representatives on the panel talking about the workforce in Idaho. But it quickly turned to a discussion about our healthcare workforce, specifically our maternal care workforce in the state of Idaho, Gemma.
Yeah, and I want to dig into this a little bit, Clark, because they one of the CEOs of an Idaho hospital said basically, no, we're not getting the support that we need from a medical force standpoint. But talk to us about this debate about OBGYNs leaving the state. The fact that, and they are saying that it is because of these ambiguous abortion laws that we have in place. And there was this back and forth that happened with, I think, one legislator basically saying that's a lie. That's not, they're not leaving because of that. Yet these hospitals have real life scenarios that have happened that have said this is why we see a shortage. And we've never had a lot of OBGYNs in this state to begin with.
Right, absolutely. We heard from two medical experts, Gemma, at the talk in Idaho Falls. One was the CEO of Eastern Idaho Regional Medical Center. Her name is Betsy Hunsicker, and ERMAC is the largest hospital on the eastern side of the state. We also heard from Dr. Jennifer Cook, who's the OB Fellowship Director and the Associate Director of Family Medicine Residency at Full Circle Health in Boise. They said that huge swaths of Idaho are basically considered maternal care deserts where there aren't enough OBGYNs, in some cases in entire counties, to serve the patients. And the CEO of ERMAC said the legislature is not doing enough to support a healthcare workforce, a physician workforce, the OBGYN workforce that we need. And then from there, it got even more intense. Dr. Jennifer Cook, the OB fellowship director, was talking about how Idaho's full abortion ban has run off some OBGYNs who had practiced in Idaho and is scaring off potential students who would be entering the
Mm-hmm.
profession in Idaho. And she said that the distinction is that Idaho's law has an exemption for the life of the mother, but not for the health of the pregnant mother. And Dr. Cook said because of that distinction, not having the health of the pregnant mother involved, that it's really had a huge impact on physicians and their interest in practicing here. A lot of them say that they have concerns about what they can and can't do. And so I'm just going to read you a couple of things that Dr. Cook said, and then I'm going to get into the debate real quickly about how a legislator challenged her. But Dr. Cook said with this law on the book that only allows for the saving of the life of the mother, she said she had fellows who sat and watched a woman who was 19 weeks pregnant bleed, and they couldn't do anything about it and just waited until she got so sick that she was about to die. Dr. Cook said, if that was your family, that would be really, really scary. And right at that moment, Representative Josh Tanner, he's a Republican from Eagle. He's actually a member of Republican leadership. He turned to the legislator turning next to him, and he said, that's not true. And right about that
Mm.
time, Dr. Cook stopped her presentation for a second. And she said, I can see some of you guys rolling your eyes. I can see all of you guys rolling your eyes at me here. And what happened next was kind of an intense discussion where Representative Tanner challenged Dr. Cook. He said that the abortion law, in his opinion, is very clear. He said that it has become a political discussion, and he actually suggested that doctors and physicians might need a little bit more training to understand Idaho's law and how it
Hmm.
relates to the oath that they take to do no harm. It got pretty intense, but that's all it was.
Uh-huh.
It was just a discussion. There wasn't any actual confrontation or anything like that. But I think it was a pretty illuminating discussion. I've heard and we've all talked about for a while now, for a couple of years, about how Idaho really ranks near the bottom nationally when it comes to physicians per capita across the state of Idaho, and in particularly when we talk about OBGYNs. The legislature's been told that the state's lost around 25% of the OBGYNs that had been practicing in Idaho. And medical professionals on numerous occasions have said it's the clarity in that total abortion ban, that near
Mm-hmm.
total abortion ban that doesn't have a distinction for the health of the mother, not just to save her life. It was a little bit of a technical discussion, but if you go back to the IdahoCapitalSun.com, I have kind of a full account of the workforce development panel, who the speakers were, and I actually had a chance to interview Representative Josh Tanner about the discussion and the debate after it took place. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting discussion there for sure. But what was interesting is that the speakers they didn't sugarcoat their answers. I think they answered honestly, and they
Mm-hmm.
expressed, in their opinion, concerns that the state is facing. And so it was this interesting moment where almost a legislator and a medical professional were almost debating this in public out there at the College of Eastern Idaho, Gemma.
So, Nate, a plea agreement has finally been reached in the case against a Pocatello funeral home. Before you tell us about that, can you remind us about this case that goes back, what, to 2021?
Yeah, 2021, some representatives at ISU told Pocatello police that a family had contacted them regarding a body that was supposed to be donated to the university for research. But the body was taken to the funeral home and the family never received the cremains or anything like that. So ISU then discovered that they had several cadavers that were never received. A police investigation ensued. They went over to the funeral home and found the remains of 11 people that were attached to
Mm.
altered documents. One body was on the ground. I mean, there was a lot of questions about what was happening at this funeral home. So Mr. Lance Peck, the funeral home owner, he was arrested and charged originally with multiple felonies. I mean, 22 felonies, 63 misdemeanors. And this case has taken years and years to finally get to this point.
And Nate, do we have any idea in this plea agreement as to why Peck did what he did? Or maybe we'll
No,
never know.
yeah, he has never spoken out. He has never said anything. So the plea agreement basically is he will serve 3 to 10 years in prison.
Mm.
Uh, and he pled it's kind of a complicated plea agreement, but bottom line is he did plead guilty to several of the charges. Several of the charges were dismissed. And maybe when he is sentenced, we will hear from him. But
Hmm.
he lost his license to run a funeral home. In fact, the funeral home has since been torn down and it's now being used as a parking lot for Pocatello High School. But there's people all over the place that are wondering if their loved ones were affected, if the cremains they
Hmm.
received were actually those of their loved ones. So hopefully this can at least close a chapter in this story and people can, move forward.
Yeah, hopefully. Clark, I've got about 3 minutes left, and I want to talk about we talked about JFAC on this spring tour. One of the things they did this week was tour the Idaho National Laboratory's research facilities. Can you talk to us about this? Because is this the first time in like what, 50 years that they're building a new nuclear reactor there?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gemma. And I thought that was kind of one of the things that I was most interested in. I was able to go out on the tour with JFAC. It was actually the first time I've gone out in the desert to what's kind of colloquially known
Hmm.
as the site, but it's this
Yeah.
massive, like 890 square foot research facility out in the desert just west of Idaho Falls. It's three-quarters the size of the state of Rhode Island. That's how big it is. Um, but yeah, talking with some of the folks at Idaho National Laboratory, which is really the country's leading nuclear national lab, it's really undergoing a period of growth. And as you mentioned, for the first time in 50 years, Idaho National Laboratory is in the process of building and permitting new nuclear reactors. There's plans for at least a couple in the next, say, before 2030 to come online. And that would be the first time in 50 years. But the workforce at INL has expanded. It went from about 3,800 employees 5 years ago to like 6,500 employees
Wow.
today. There's been talk of a waiver to the 1995 settlement agreement, which has to do with limiting the amounts and shipments of certain types of
Hmm.
nuclear fuel into Idaho. They're going to be allowing a new shipment of spent nuclear fuel into Idaho, probably in about 2027, to do additional research. But I just thought it was interesting. It seems like it's kind of at a moment right now where INL is ramping up and expanding programs, building new reactors, building up its workforce. And so the legislators went out and took a look. And it was my first time out there. It was several of the legislators' first times out there. But we found out that they do a lot more than just nuclear research. They do cybersecurity. They build armor for the Abrams tanks. They do a lot of research on AI, on this sort of arms race with artificial intelligence that's happening right now between China and the United States. And so just a lot of really interesting, cutting edge, and quite frankly,
Hmm.
sometimes secretive work that's going on out in the desert just outside of Idaho Falls. And yeah, so I kind of had a story on Wednesday about the tour, about some of the folks that the legislators met with, but it was really kind of an overview of some of the expansion and some of the new programs that we're going to start seeing at Idaho National Lab over the coming, say, 4 years. And I'm really interested to learn more and to cover it more and to hopefully go back to INL more. I know that there's a lot of interesting work and research, but also when we talk about nuclear materials, there's a
Clark,
big
I'm going to have to
responsibility.
unfortunately cut you off. I'm so sorry, but we are out of time. I thank both you and Nate Eaton for taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.